Namaskar. We are studying subject CPS 3 and CPS 4, Curriculum and Pedagogic Studies, School Subject English. We have started unit number 2, Acquisition of Second Language. Today we will see 2.3, Language Acquisition versus Language Learning. See, uh, so our topic is language acquisition versus language learning. Friends, if you have seen or listened the earlier two videos of language, what is language acquisition, what is second language acquisition, both the videos are important to understand the language acquisition versus language learning. So hope you have listened it, you will then you will understood this video. Okay, so let's see language acquisition versus language learning. See, both the concepts are different, language acquisition and language learning. Both are seem to us that they are similar in meaning, but there is a difference between these two concepts. So let us see what is the difference between these two concepts in language acquisition and language learning. So we will describe each points one by one. One is language acquisition and one is language learning. So let's see the language acquisition here. Language acquisition is that language acquisition is an involuntary process. It is involuntary process. It means unaichhik hai. So that process we involve indirectly without our intention. So it is language acquisition is an involuntary process. See the language learning. The language learning includes the process of learning about the language skills, grammars, and text. See, when we are going to learn the language, we are going to involve to learn the skills, the grammars, and the text. It means that it is not a involuntary process, but it is a we are going to focus on skills, grammars, and text. That is language learning. And in language acquisition, we are going to uh, acquire it, but here we are going to learn it, the skills, grammar, and text, etc. That is the first basic difference between these two concepts. Second one is that language acquisition is internalized subconsciously through exposure in a natural environment. This process becomes acquisition. See, here in language acquisition, subconsciously through exposure in a natural environment, we are going to acquire the language. So I have given example of Marathi language. We learn it by subconsciously. म्हणजे आपल्या मनेने ध्यानेने वी आर गोइंग टू डेव्हलप दॅट लँग्वेज. So in a natural environment, it means that we have got natural environment to develop it. That is language acquisition. Here language learning is different. Learning language is internalized consciously through instruction in classroom setting. This process becomes learning. So here, while language learning, we have consciously given instruction in classroom setting. So take an example of English language. We have a classroom, and in that classroom we have some instruction about the language, and consciously we are going to learn it. So that is the difference between here we have acquired naturally, here we have a consciously in a classroom setting we are going to learn it. So that is the second difference between language acquisition and language learning. Third one is that when a learner internalizes a language subconsciously, he may not have grammatical competence, but he may have communicative competence in a particular context. Here, uh, in a language acquisition, we develop language, we can speak it, we can listen it, we can understand it, but we do not develop a grammatical competence in that, but we develop communicative competence in that language. Take an example. Take the example of 6-year child. He use Marathi language to speak with the family members, but he do not know the grammar of that language. It means that he acquired it subconsciously without learning the grammar. So it is called a language acquisition. Now take the example of language learning. Language learning is not communicative. It is the result of direct instruction in the rules of language. Language learning students have conscious knowledge of the new language and can talk about that knowledge. So here in language learning, it is not used in a communication. So take an example of English. From Marathi family, student is going to learn it. He is not going to communicate in his house. So it means that he it is the result of direct instruction in the rules of language. Here in classroom, he has given so many rules of that language, and he some instruction about that language, and he is going to develop that language. Students have conscious knowledge of the new language and can talk about the that knowledge. So here students is going to learn the knowledge about the language, so he can talk about that knowledge of that language. So that is the difference between language acquisition and language learning. This is the third one different. Let's see the fourth one. Here in language acquisition, children acquire language without learning the grammatical rules and without memorization of a word. So no need to aware of the learning process. So in language acquisition, children are going to acquire the language without learning the grammatical rules, without memorizing the words, without there is no need to aware of the learning process. So that is the in language acquisition. In language learning, children learn the language by learning the grammatical rules and need to aware of the learning process. See, uh, uh, take an example of Marathi language. We learn without learning the grammar, without memorizing the words, without focusing on the learning process, etc. We learn it. But take an example of English language. We learn that language by learning the grammatical rules. First, we have to learn the grammatical rules of that language. We need to aware of the learning process. When teacher is going to teach us that language, we are going to focus on that process, so that then we can learn it. That is the difference between language acquisition and language learning. So take an fifth difference. The acquisition refers to the subconscious process of picking up a language through exposure. Here it is subconscious process of acquiring the language without uh, picking up a language through it means that picking up language through exposure. It means that we have so many exposure in day to day life. We are going to pick that language subconsciously. It is refers as a acquisition. Now taken the language learning. The learning refers to the conscious process of studying about the language. In language learning, we are going to consciously in that process, we are going to study about the language, then we can learn that language. That is the another difference of the uh, language acquisition and language learning. Sixth one, see that it is decoding and parsing ability. Here decoding in the sense, we whatever we listen, we are going to decoding, and we are going to analyze that word. That type of ability we develop in language acquisition. But take the see the language learning. The language learning is the ability to use it and the ability of learning about the language. Here we have ability to use of that language. Take an example. When we learn certain rules of that language, of English language, then we are going to use that language. It means that here we develop the ability to use that language. Do you understand? So ability of learning about the language we are going to develop here. That is again difference between language acquisition and language learning. See the seventh one. Speakers are concerned not with the form of their utterances, but with the messages they are conveying and understanding. See, in language acquisition, whatever the pupils are going to use that language, they are not focusing on the form of that language, but they are focusing on the message of that language. That is very important. Just take an example of small boy, 3 or 4 years boy, who is not able to utter a full sentence, but he want water. He says mama water, pani pani, mom. It means that he is not going to make a meaningful sentence, but the message he wants to convey to his mother, that he wants a water. So that message is important in this language acquisition. So speakers are concerned not with the form of their utterances, how they utter, how they make the sentence. It is not important, but the what the message they are going to convey or understand. If they understand, then it is important. So conveying and understanding is important than the form. in language acquisition. So see there, language learning, speakers are concerned with the form of their utterances and the messages they are conveying and understanding. Here both are the very important, the form and the convey and the understanding, all these are important. That is the difference between language acquisition and language learning. Ninth one, see, it is an it is an activity to be acquired language through the source of natural communication. See here, we acquire the language through the source of natural communication. Natural communication, we have so many sources of natural communication in the family, with the family member, with the society, with the friend, etc. We use that language and we develop it. So in language learning, it is an activity to be practiced and developed until the use of the language becomes a matter of habit. Here we have to practice that language until we become habitual to use of that language. So still we have to learn it. That is again difference between the language acquisition and language learning. The 10th one difference is that it is learned informally without a classroom, textbook or teacher. It is natural or spontaneous learning. See, in language acquisition, we do not have a classroom, we do not have a textbook, we do not have a teacher to teach that language. We develop it as a natural or spontaneous learning. Hmm? Again, take an example. When we learn the Marathi language, we do not have a classroom before speak it. We do not have a textbook. We do not have a teacher. Yet we develop that language. Afterward, when we enter the classroom, then we have a teacher to teach that language. Before it, we do not have all these things, yet we are able to speak, listen and understand, because we have acquired that language. In language learning, it is learned formally with a classroom, textbook or teacher. The situation is created for learning. So while language learning, we have all these three things: classroom is there, textbook is there, teacher is there, and the situation is created to learn that language. That is the basic difference between language acquisition and language learning. So whatever I present before you, I have took some references from these books and website. You also read these books and visit this website to take more detail in about the topic. Hope you understood, you may understood what is the language acquisition and what is language learning. Thank you. Thank you very much.